As you'd seen in the previous video, I had to take out the tinted taillights because the police were giving me a hard time for having them around town. And I still see cars driving around this town with like spray painted taillights that are so bad they're not even translucent. But I think they were picking on me for being a Mustang. But anyway, took the taillights out, and now I wanted to get down to this oil leak. If you remember watching the dyno video, you could see some smoke coming off the exhaust. So I knew there was some oil dripping in there somewhere. So obviously it came down to probably the rear main seal. So that's going to involve pulling the whole transmission off, even though I just put the drivetrain all back in the car. And you know, it's just one of those things where you got to park the car and get working on it. So I jacked up the car and I took the shifter off and drained the fluid out. This isn't really a fun job. I've done it so many times like this, on my back, on the cement, no lift. You know, that's just the way I always did it. But anyway, I did get the transmission off, and I got looking underneath the car, had it up high on jack stands and everything. And by the way, I love this TR3650 transmission. It has been so great, 140,000 miles, and it never skipped a beat. I love that trans, and it's been that way in all the other Mach 1s and 5-speed Mustangs I've had. They've been great transmissions. So I got the old rear main seal out. It wasn't really set in there right, and I also went down and found that there's a part called an oil slinger, and that goes behind the rear main seal. So I took the old one off, and I even got to the point where I took what I call the dog house. This is the back plate that goes over the rear main seal, and this one was the one that came off the original Bullitt engine, and it was not leaking. The rear seal was in there just right from the factory, so I decided just to replace the whole dog house, or that whole back panel, and put that over the crank, and it worked out great. So the rear main wasn't leaking anymore. And it was fun. I had my cousin over there, and we put the clutch back on the car, and we wrote on it with a marker, my cousin Zach. Zach's Bullitt number 0140. That's Bullitt 140. I made a story about the car. And Justin's Bullitt number 4622, which is my Bullitt's number. And Bullitt Buddies for Life is what we always called each other, because we had our two Bullets together. So we wrote that on the clutch, reassembled it, and put it back up there. So I got rid of the rear main seal leak, but there was still some oil dripping. It was really frustrating. So the only thing to do was support the engine and drop the K-member and go for the oil pan. I was pretty sure the oil pan gasket was not sealing right, and so I did reseal it. I put a whole new gasket in there, but I did make the mistake of listening to a friend who told me to put Permatex around there and double seal it. And the biggest problem with that is I used the orange RTV, which is not oil resistant, and so that flaked away and got gooey in no time. But there was still oil leaking, and it was not the oil pan, although I didn't know it wasn't the oil pan. And so this time I got a whole new oil pan, bought it from MMR. This is the 8-quart deep sump oil pan, and I put that on the car, and it looked great. But again, it required me lifting up the car, pulling the engine, supporting it, you know, taking all the suspension out, dropping the K-member. It was almost like doing headers. It was basically the same job as doing headers. And I had to do that all over again, and it still was leaking. And so I got talking to another good friend, and he said, you know what, I bet your timing cover is leaking, and it's leaking down onto the rim of the oil pan, and it's making its way around the oil pan, making it look like the oil pan is leaking. So we went ahead and pulled the whole face off the engine again. I know I had already done this when I did the crank wheel and the new valve springs, but I pulled the timing cover off, put all new gaskets in. My friend came over and helped me, and that was really good of him, and we got it all in right, and the oil leaks were gone. So now I was driving the car around, but of course, with every time you drop the K-member in suspension, you gotta get the car aligned, get the steering wheel straight, get everything done on the alignment rack. And I tell you what, I hate when other people drive my car. The guy stalled the car 3 times trying to get it onto the lift. I wish he would have just let me do it like other shops have done. But anyway, took the Bullitt in, got it aligned. I've done this probably 3 or 4 times because of all the times I had to drop the suspension for the headers and everything. And so now the car was safe to drive. And so now it was time to go do some more racing. And so here we are at the old airport races. This was something that was really fun the city was doing for a short little time. I actually spent my whole life growing up at this airport. My parents had a flight school, and that's where I kept my Mach 1 when I first bought it, when I was living in the apartments in their hangar. And so this airport was like home to me. So it was really cool that we were able to race down the runway. And the city did this for a short little while, but then it ended, which was really sad. We even had people who were sponsoring these races. Local businesses pitched in. They all helped pave a pad at the beginning of the runway, and that was so we could do our burnouts and not chew up our tires, because the runway is graded cement, and so it chews up tires really bad. But we could have the whole launch area, the 60-foot area, was all cement, and those local businesses were really nice to come in and help make that for us. And they were racers too, and people even bought race cars during this time, business owners who wanted to participate and get into racing and stuff. And there were even a lot of people who brought their race cars out of storage, and it was just a really fun time. And unfortunately, the city shut it down, and when we had the committee try to ask them if we could do certain events up there, they sent a bunch of heavy duty equipment, earth movers and stuff, and they tore up all of the cement for our racetrack and ruined it. So that was really sad. But while it lasted, it was a lot of fun. You can see my Bullitt here next to my friend's Mach 1. I have a story about that car, and my other friend's Mach 1. I have a story about that car too. And so we were having a lot of fun. And this first race is my Bullitt against my friend's Trans Am WS6 6-speed. This is so funny when you don't think that a 2-valve will beat an LS car. By the way, here's another LS swapped car. So the next car I got lined up next to was this MR2. Now this car was something that I really wanted to beat, because the guy who owned it was nothing shy of a complete jerk. He had gotten into some fights with my brother about cars. You know, he was trash talking, calling people out. His big thing was always calling people out with other people's cars. He'd come up at the meets and be like, "You race my friend, $100. I bet you $100 right now that my friend will whoop on you." You know, and he was always calling people out with other people's cars. And he was a big jerk, and he wouldn't stand down, and he was a loudmouth, all these things. He hated muscle cars, and he was always trashing muscle cars. And then my older friends would show up with their Mach 1, and he would say, "Oh, I respect all cars. It doesn't matter what you drive. You know, I love all cars." And he would be all gullible because they were older people, and he'd act like he's all buddy-buddy, but then behind your back he would trash talk. You know, we'd go to the car meets, and other people would come up to us and be like, "Hey, right when you guys pulled in, he was talking mad crap on all your cars, and now he's acting like he's your friend." And I was ready to run, and I was ready to beat him. And of course, there's always a chance for driver error. I did not want to lose to this guy. We got lined up. Unfortunately, nobody took video of this race, but I did beat him by about a car length. And it was a really good race. I think I even spun a little bit, and so I was able to get away from him and get ahead of him. And so that was a very big victory, because this guy, he was real difficult to be around, and he'd go to the car meets and he was just a real troublemaker. So I was really excited to beat this guy, and I look back at the social media posts about it in my car club, and everybody was just upset with this guy, and everybody was glad to see him lose. And so I was really excited that the Bullitt put this guy in his place. So the Bullitt continued as a good daily driver. This is it at work, by my brother in my friend's car. I enjoyed driving it everywhere. It was just fun to have. And even when I went places, I would park it in the back of the parking lot like I would my other nice cars, and just taking care of it. There was routine maintenance, of course, as this continued, and I finally got around to putting a chin spoiler back on. And this chin spoiler would be on the new bumper that I swapped over from the other car, but I wanted to leave the chin spoiler off while I did certain things to the car, like trailered it to the dyno. And the car was running great. Of course, it needed a new battery, things like that here and then. But now it was time to go and do some back road racing. This is one of my favorite places to go. It's an old highway, and here are some good races with a GTO and a Subaru. So here's a little test hit before the race. So this was my buddy's GTO. It was the LS1 6-speed car. It was a fast car. He had a lot done to it. The first 2 races are the Bullitt beating it. And the 3rd race, he beat the Bullitt, and then he admitted later that he put a 50 shot of nitrous on to do it. So I was pretty proud of the Bullitt that it took nitrous on an LS1 to beat it. Now it's time for the Bullitt to whip on the Subaru. And this next run was my cousin's black Bullitt against my Bullitt. So those runs were all awesome. Then the owner of this 2001 Silver Lightning moved to town, and he had a smaller pulley making 12 pounds of boost, ported heads, cams, built bottom end, and he was ready to race the Bullitt. We met at a car meet, and it was fun to be there. I put my drag radials on, and this is what the Bullitt sounded like right before the race. It was a monster. Listen to these cars scream. So there was this roundabout in town, and it was smooth around the center, and I always wanted to drift the Bullitt around there. So one day I just did it. So after a quick oil change and a few adjustments, I wanted to go racing some more. My friend had this torch red Mach 1. It had basic bolt-ons, but we also did an axle swap in my driveway with a black Bullitt that I bought, and it had a 373 axle. And so he wanted the 373s in the Mach 1, and we swapped it all over, and now he wanted to see what his Mach 1 with 373s and full bolt-ons could do against my Bullitt. So we went out and had some runs in Mexico, and it was a blast. You can see how excited I was, how happy I was, how much fun I was having. You can see his car in the background. That's looking through the back window. We were having so much fun. Now, he was beating the Bullitt by about a car length, and it seemed like no matter what, I couldn't quite catch him. And so we decided to go down to the racetrack. He wanted to go race the Bullitt at the drag strip, and I probably said that I could probably do better at the drag strip, and so we both went down together. This was an important trip for me too because my parents came and my dad was there. You can see him in this picture. He brought the wheels in the Suburban so that we could take both the cars down there and have our drag radials with us for the races. And this is important to me too because my dad passed away a couple years ago, and this was one of the few times that he came and watched the races, and it was nice to have him there for that. So we got the cars all prepped. Here's another picture of us swapping the wheels on in the Shelby American parking lot. That's where Shelby used to be. And this is the cars at the gas station getting ready for the races and in the staging lanes. And shout out to My Taxi 1320 if you know who he is. This is really cool to see his Terminator in the staging lanes. It was one of the first times we saw the car. There was another blue Bullitt there with Terminator wheels on it, and it was missing one of the sail panels. It was actually a pretty specific car. So this was a really fun rivalry. It was just friends rivalry, and both the cars were pretty evenly matched. Like I said, he had gotten away from me on the street, and so I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to chase him down or how we'd do. Plus, we're both on drag radials like we were on the street, so this was going to be a pretty good race. And I think a lot of it was driver race, but here's the race. It was a lot of fun. This is just one of my favorite things to do is go to the racetrack. So as you can see, the Bullitt took that one pretty good. There were some other times we raced and it kept red lighting before I had a chance to go, so it was kind of weird. The light would just go red before I even launched, so I don't know what was going on with that, but that was the cleanest run we had. The Bullitt took it on that one, but that Mach 1 with the 373s was a very fast car. They were very evenly matched. So I went down to the racetrack again, took the radials with me this time, took my jack. I jacked up the car, switched the radials on, and then I would stash my stock wheels and the jack and go racing. And here's a picture of me in the tech inspection lanes with a friend that I had met on the forums. This was on moddedmustangs.com, and he was a local Las Vegas guy, and he was real fun to hang out with. We would race all the time. He had a Whipple on this 3-valve, and he did really well with that car, so it was fun to meet up with him. But as we were down there, there was this black Subaru STI, and the guy was bragging about the car, saying that it made 350 wheel and he was so fast and all this stuff. And I thought that would be a really good match for the Bullitt, and I really wanted to race him. So I watched him make a pass, and I thought, I think I could beat him. And I ran out to the Bullitt, and I got in, and I drove over to the staging lanes, and sure enough, by the time he got in the staging lanes again, we were lined up right next to each other, and we had a good race, and I whooped him. This was one of my best passes at Las Vegas Motor Speedway in the Bullitt to the time, and it was a 13.7, so the Bullitt was really moving, and it did a great job. So I had a lot of fun. We had the airport races coming up again. We had all my friends get together. This is all of us going out for lunch during the races, and then here's the Bullitt with its drag radials on. This is probably one of my favorite pictures of it in action, just going into the staging lanes. It had the Terminator wheels on, and that was cool because I just had the drag radials on my Terminator wheels now, and so I would just swap them onto the Bullitt and go up and go racing. And so these events were really fun, and we had a few of them before they shut them down, but it was just such a nice place to go up there and race. Now this next race is pretty crazy. My friends Kenny Bell Nitrous E85 GT against the Bullitt. Now I know the Bullitt wasn't going to keep up in this race, and that's okay. What I like about this race is it shows how much faster this supercharged GT is than the Bullitt. And later on, the Bullitt will get a supercharger, and it will be just as fast as this GT. They actually ran identical times at the track. So for now, here's this race.
I love how they sound. Yeah, they do have so a good sound. I would buy one just to listen to it.
You can hear him heating them up. So this was a really good race against a 370Z. The Bullitt spun really bad in first, spun going into second, but I was able to get door to door with him and go all the way down the track the same way. And then the next pass, I ran a faster time than he did for the whole day. So it was a pretty good race, but I wish I wouldn't have spun.
Spinning like so
mother
much,
off the line.
460.
So this was one of my first races against a Coyote. That's the 5.0 liter Mustang from 2011 to present. And I didn't know that the 5.0 was in that car. I thought this was actually a 3-valve car, but the Bullitt did a great job. So next up to race is this 1997 Mustang GT, a black Mustang GT, and some of you may recognize this. This would later be my car. So this is how the car looks now. If you have seen the channel, this was a Mustang that I saved, and before I saved it, this was it at the race. Previous owner, it was a 5.0 liter stroker with cams, everything, built automatic transmission. So here it is racing the Bullitt. Now to its disadvantage, it still had stock gears.
One of us are loose.
So as you can see, the Bullitt isn't always perfect. It had some issues, and one of the ignition coils came loose. I had to get under there and tighten it up and get it back plugged in right and work on the car, and I was able to turn around and get back on the racetrack, and it did great after that. This picture is actually kind of cool. It shows the Bullitt on a good launch against this truck. This truck had a lot done to it.
The Nissan's go out there.
You ran right out there.
No, I got my truck here with all their, tires and everything. Jacks, tools.
I was also able to beat this supercharged Rouge with my Bullitt. He was a friend of mine. It was a good race. It was just real fun to be up there at those airport races. The Bullitt did phenomenal. It was out there just battling everybody and taking home a lot of wins. I have over 100 races won in this car, and I'll show you the kill list later. I have it in my garage. I wrote down every race I won. So there's a lot more coming. Stay tuned for the next part of this video series about the history of my Bullitt. Thanks for watching.